Alright guys, let's see. So this is going to be kind of the introduction to the Oregon Trail project. So I'm going to just kind of go over what's going on in this project and then give you a little bit of a demo of how this is supposed to work. So let's see here. So hopefully everybody has at least seen how this game works or knows what it is. This used to be super popular back when I was probably in grade school or something. I feel like everybody's seen at least some rendition of this, or it pops up everywhere. Like it came back as a Facebook game. This game just will not die. So here again, we are recreating it and expanding its lifespan yet again. So we're going to be recreating this, right? The goal is that we travel from Independence, Missouri, all the way to Oregon City, which is 2,000 miles by December 31st. However, the trail is arduous, and each day costs you food. You can hunt and rest, but you have to get there before the winter. Man, we could have done some fun Game of Thrones references with that, but we didn't. So anyway, behavior of this game. Player's going to start in Independence, Missouri, which this ends up being pretty much irrelevant. It doesn't matter because all you care about is the miles. It starts on March 1st, which is actually important because we do keep track of the date in this game. So start there. We have 2,000 miles to go. You're given 500 pounds of food at the start, and you have 5 HP. The player must get to Oregon by December 31st. So it's quite a bit of ways, but you know it's tough when we're going to see in a little bit here that you don't travel all that far over like a week span basically. So at the beginning of the game, the user gets asked their name. Each turn, the player is asked what the action they want to choose, and they can type in from a set list of things. So they can either travel, they can rest, they can hunt, they can get their status, they can get help, or they can quit. The player's health will decrease twice each month. There's going to be more on that in a little bit. The player eats 5 pounds of food a day. So from your 500 food store, every day they're eating. We don't want them to starve. Travel is a command that the player can type in because this is text-based and it's a single-player game. So you randomly move between 30 and 60 miles, and it takes 3 to 7 days, which is going to be randomized. For resting, you increase your health once up to a maximum of 5, so you can't get super beyond healthy. You can just get fully healthy. And this is going to take 2 to 5 days, and that's another randomized amount. Hunt adds 100 pounds of food and takes 2 to 5 days. So you get a lot of food, but it's costly. And then status lists how much food you have, how much health, distance traveled, and day. Note that this is not going to take any time. It's just a status check, so you can query that anytime you want. Help lists all the commands, and again, doesn't impact anything. It doesn't take time for your guy to look at what commands are available to him, and quit will end the game. So here's an example of maybe what a status printout would look like. Just kind of neatly printed with some tabs and things, which reminds me, we've done those before. It's just \T. It's using the escape character in a print sequence. So implementation details here. So we're going to create functions for all the options that a player can take. We're going to use global variables to track things like player health, food, and pounds, miles to go, current day, current month. So there's a lot of different ways that we're going to be able to do that. We'll get to that in a little bit. We're going to create a function called addDay, which updates the day. So the idea behind this is basically that every time that you add a day, this gets called, and then it handles some of these things. Like it's got to, like what would addDay be responsible for? So obviously, like every single day that the player is eating 5 pounds of food, there's these weird chances that they're going to lose HP twice in a month. So somehow we have to figure out that sort of piece where are they going to lose health on this particular day? And then it's also probably got to keep track of things like how many days we've been traveling, or like what month it is, or stuff like that. We're going to use a list to keep track of which months have 31 days, and use this in the add function. So this is going to be useful for when we roll over the month, basically. I mean, it depends on the way that you want to implement this. But these are given to us right here. So up at the top here, we can kind of see there's going to be some imports, anything that you want to use. If you want to use random, or if you want to pull in any other libraries, you're free to do that. We have a global variable that's called months with 31 days, and this is, notice all caps, and that's because globals, this is stylistically how you do it in Python. They are all caps and snake case, which just means that all the words are separated by underscores. So these are our months with 31 days. One thing that's kind of interesting to note here is that we're given one, which is January, but this game is going to start on March, so it's going to go from third month all the way through the 12th, or 12/31. So we never actually need to deal with January. Same thing with month names. We'll get January and February in here, but we don't have to deal with either of those months. And that's also kind of a blessing because February has got a ton of weird rules around it, right? Because it's got less days than most months because it's, and they can have like leap years and all this nonsense. So, screw February. We don't like that month. Anyway, let's keep moving on here. So if the game, we're going to keep track of all these things. They're given to us because there was a lot of busy work and nobody needs to type all that stuff in, so I just gave it to you. Game ends if you run out of time, basically. So if we get to the 31st, the game's going to end. If health runs out, so if we just never take care of, if our health keeps decreasing each month and we never rest to regain it, then we just run out of HP and we die. If the game ends if you get to Oregon, so if our 2,000 miles gets decreased to 0, or depending on how you're doing this, you could also start at 0 miles with 2,000 to go, and once you get up to 2,000, then the game ends. Or the player quits. So if they type in quit, the game should just end instantly, and whatever. We don't need to worry about anything else ever again. So those are the implementation details here. Let's see. Then some important notes, and this is again the autograder because it's got to basically do this like injection type stuff where it's capturing, it checks to see that you're using rand int and then substitutes in values based on that, or captures what value it's randomly generating, so that way we can kind of compare against what the expected output would be. For anything that we're using random stuff, we're going to use rand int. Okay. Then autograding is basically going to be like a smoke test, so it's going to test our core functionality, but we'll have to be reviewing the submitted code. Now this is because basically we're going to review things like we're going to tell it to run, command travel and verify that it's, every single time that you do it, it's moving between 30 and 60 miles and taking 3 to 7 days. But that doesn't mean that the game is going to play correctly. It just means if all these things isolate, or in isolation, they run okay. But there might be other problems with the way that they interact. So that's what that means by this is a smoke test. Pass is a keyword here. We've come across this maybe a little bit. So this is basically lets us prototype. So I can give you things like, these are the functions I want you to use, and this because in the autograder it needs to know what functions to call. So it's calling command travel, and it needs to know that that command exists in everybody's program. So that's why this is done this way. Pass is just something that lets be a valid file, basically. If we didn't have this here, Python would get mad because it would think that we're trying to define this inside of this function, but it's got all screwed up white spacing because it should be tabbed in. It's just bad news. This is good for prototyping, and it just tells us, hey, there's a function here, but we don't have any of the contents filled in. We're going to get to that later. That also lets you just kind of do your testing as you go along as well, because you can fill out travel, and it's not going to break the rest of your code when you don't have rest and hunt completed. So yeah, we're going to need to replace all of these instances with the code that we're filling out, and then we're going to need to make sure to comment out the last line here with run, because again, this is supposed to be invoking a loop. It's going to just run indefinitely, and the autograder gets confused. So that's what's going on with all of these important notes. So let's take a look through the code that we're given here. So of course we got a couple of global variables, and these are all named in appropriate ways. These are given to us as lists. One of these is a list of months that have 31 days. So, one would correspond to January, 3 is to February or to March, 5 is going to be May, and so on. Month names, it's just typing all of these out so that if you want to use those, they're nicely formatted. We can see here in the date, it's going to ask us to print them out kind of in a nice way. Okay. And then if you have any other globals, and we know that we're going to have some, because this is saying that we need to use globals for things like how much food and how much distance and what day it is. So we're going to probably need to define some stuff up here. Getters and setters. So these are for the autograder again, and it's just so that like between tests, so like if I want to run an autograde test and say travel, and then I need to get how many miles left and verify that the amount was between 30 and 60 or something. That's why we have these. Like, I don't know what your variable is going to be named, but I know that this function exists that's retrieving whatever your variable. So I mean, you could name your variable any goofy thing that you want. You could name it, like wheels on the bus or something. It doesn't matter as long as it's returned in miles left and you know what this is. I mean, that's a very poor name choice, but as long as this function returns it, everything's all honky-dory. Set miles, kind of do the same thing. We're just going to give it new miles. We can go back if you need to look at how Project Okamon does this. It's going to give you some examples because you're going to need to have globals in here and whatnot. Same thing, we've got getters and setters for health and food. We've got this guy, which is defining whether or not the game is still in progress, so we'll probably use that somewhere later on. GetDate is going to return a string that's formatted with full month name and a numeric date, so kind of similar to this, right? So it's going to return like March 10th, or like today is May 12th, so that's what it would return. Just like in something that's human readable, because that's kind of what a player is going to expect. They don't really want to see like something nonsensical like, oh, you've been traveling for like 9 days and you have to kind of guesstimate how many, what day and month that is. So that's what that's doing. Get elapsed days is going to be similar to get date, but instead it's going to return an integer value for how many days have gone by in the game. So it's kind of like how this is used over here. So this is 9 days have gone by in the game, which puts us at March 10th because we left on because the first day, so day 0 would have been 3-1. Progress this 9 days, we get up to the 10th. Reset date is just going to nuke all of the days, okay? And so this is again used for how the Autograding works, because it's got to reset and then check all of your things, like run how did travel send you the right amount of days. Alright, so now we're going to get into the command functions. So these are all kind of prototyped, so that way everybody's got the same things, and that way the Autograder knows what to call, because we need that sort of skeleton in order for it to work. So this is going to basically has all the information that's over in here. So travel moving us between 30 and 60 miles, which means that whatever date that we're setting for this, or how many miles are global, it's going to have to subtract that off every single time that we successfully travel without dying. And it takes 3 to 7 days. All these guys are kind of same thing, just all the stuff from the behavior and implementation details gets transcribed over here. Other functions. So there's 2 different things that are in here. Add day is representing it progresses the game 1 single day. And then we have update days, which if you noticed in here, like almost all of these have these things where it's like this is going to take 2 to 5 days, 3 to 7 days. So the idea here is that we pass those values in. So if something takes 2 to 5 days, we're going to say update days 2 and 5, and then it's going to figure out how many days that roll the dice basically, and figure out how many days we're actually going out of those 2 constraints. And then it's going to call add day that many times. So it doesn't do a whole lot. It's just kind of controlling for add day so that you don't have to have this logic done every single time. Like that's a lot of copy and paste, whereas this is um, this was a good candidate for a function because it needs to uh, it's repeat that same logic set a bunch of times in slightly different ways. Check win is going to check whether or not a player won. So basically, is miles dropped down to 0, or have we gone over whatever representation we're using? Have we gone 2,000 miles yet? Check lose has a lot more constraints to it. Did the player run out of food? Did they run out of HP? Is the date later than 12/31? Or and this one kind of gave us the thing they have more than 305 days elapsed. So that's just the calendar calculation. If any of those is true, then we return true here because we lost. Otherwise, we're returning false. Then we got the game or init is just going to be like if you want to spam something at the very beginning or collect the username, that kind of stuff. That's what init is used for. So you'd say like maybe welcome to Oregon Trail in your init, and then go what's your name, something that's only going to run one time basically. Then run is going to be our game loop. So we've seen an example of how one of these gets constructed in Pokemon. Basically, you can assume that the user is going to be giving you good stuff here. We don't need to account for all the goofy cases like they're going to type travel with caps lock. But basically, every turn we're going to need to do a couple of things, right? So first off, we need to see what the player wants to do. We need to make sure that they gave us a good command. So they can't just type in, I want to, I don't know, I want to teleport to the end. Like that's not valid. So they need to either use travel, help, rest, or one of these other valid commands. And we need to loop until we get something that's good from them. Once we have that, we need to call the corresponding function. So if they tell us travel, we need to call travel, and then we're going to assume that this is going to do what they, move them 30 to 60 miles and takes whatever days. After everything, we might want to print out various statuses throughout this, or we can just leave that up to whenever they type status so they can see what they're up to. But certain things are probably going to say things like, if you travel, you're probably going to want to get some sort of output that says, hey, you traveled, I don't know, like 43 miles because that was between 30 and 60, and it took you 4 days. Like you got lucky. This is on the lower end. Same thing like rest. If you rest at like max health or something, you're at 5 HP. It should probably tell you, and this is one of these cases too where maybe we don't let them, we don't let them sleep 2 to 5 days at max health, or maybe we give them a warning, something. I don't know. That's up to you, kind of. But yeah, so it needs to tell them, hey, you increased your health 1 level or 1 point. I don't know why this is level, because you're not leveling up your health. Or maybe we tell them that you rested and you're at max health, so nothing happened. We got hunt. Should tell them that they got 100 pounds of food or whatever and how many days it took and so forth. Alright, so that was a lot of stuff here. Let's see an implementation of this. So this is my version here, and I've got a little, like some other stuff going on here. I imported a package called Colorama that lets you have colored text because it's fun. So anyway, what should our guy be named? We'll have Geralt. I think I spelled that right. The Witcher. He can go. So let's see what some of these do. We type help and tells us all of our valid commands. So let's try travel. So this is again this Colorama package that I'm using in here. You don't need to do this, but that's what generated all this other stuff, this poetry lock and blah blah blah. So it's green because we did the thing that was progressing the game. So let's check the status here. So here we go. Printed out our status in a nice little way. So this was 6 days, and so 6 days. Consuming 5 pounds of food a day. And if we know that we started out at 500 pounds, that means that 6 times 5 is going to be 30. So that subtracted off 30 from here. Nothing bad has happened so far. We haven't lost any health randomly throughout this month, and We said we went 43 miles, so we see that reflected in here because we're slowly decreasing this, and then 6 days have gone by, so it's now March 7th. So let's just kind of keep traveling. I'm going to do a couple of these, and here we go. Randomly lost 1 HP because, you know, Oregon Trail, it was always a brutal game. Luckily in this one there's no dysentery or anything, so we're just losing random HP. So let's see what our status is now. So our food is slowly decreasing, our health is slowly decreasing, but hey, we're making a pretty good dent in how much time, or how much we've traveled, and we've gone this far. So I'm going to keep traveling for a bit because I want to show you a month rollover. Oh boy, there we go, got slammed with another one of these. So we've now rolled over a month, and we've gone 48 days. We've made a pretty considerable chunk here. We're doing pretty bad on health, almost to 50% of our food supplies. But at the month rollover, we've now, since we've gone 48 days, there's 31 days, I think, in March. Let me double check this. Yeah, months with 31 days. March was in there. So let's see, we have 31 days minus, or 48 minus 31. We got what should be about right there. So yeah, because we're starting on the 1st, so this looks like the right date to me. Yeah, so the month rolled over, and now we're in April. So maybe there's 2 different counters going on here. Maybe this is one. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this, because you could use theoretically like modulus or some sort of loop that handles how many days, you know, how many or what month that we're on based on how many days are in each month. We could also be keeping track of month and date separately. So maybe we're checking to see, or we're keeping track of, you know, this is 3, or right now this would be on 4/18. We know that April is a month that, because, or we can look up basically something like, you know, is 4 in months with 31 days, because that would be April, and we see no, so we know that this is a month with 30 days. There's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. But yeah, so let's try out some of these other commands. I'm going to say hunt. Wow, I'm getting slammed with these HP things. Let's call status here. So I hunted, and remember, while I'm hunting, I'm also, see, it took 5 days, so I lost 5 times 5 is 25 days of food, or 25 pounds of food, but I gained 100, right? So that's why some of these aren't, this isn't perfectly matching up. That's the reason why. My guy is super close to dying, so I'm gonna rest. Do some status here. Let's rest, and of course, remember everything is like order of operations is gonna be super important here too. So let's say I don't know. Say you're in this situation, right? You have 1 HP left, and the month rolls over, and so there's 2 random new chances for when your guy could take a hit. If you give them the HP first and then increment the date, that guy's going to survive. If you instead increment the date first, where he might have a chance to hit a date that's going to kill him, he won't get the HP. So it depends on how we want to implement it. I think one of the ways, or giving them the HP first, is a little bit more forgiving. The other way forces them to have a bit more foresight. So let's, I don't know, we'll just travel until this guy dies. Let's see, or anything else. He's actually cranking. He's getting low. And there we go. Your health is failing. I lost too much HP, so that was what happened. Lost the HP before I ran out of food. So it told me that this was the message. My implementation, you know, so bad things happen in red. Status stuff is usually in these white ones are, I guess this is actually input. Things that are positive actions are in green. Yeah, so this was bad. I died. So in this case, mine also tells you why you died at the very end. So if we froze to death because we just sat around, maybe we rested like nonstop and just never actually left Mississippi, we're gonna die from cold, I guess. Even though that doesn't really make any sense if you never left your hometown, but whatever. So anyway, that's kind of the general overview of how Oregon Trail is going to work. So hopefully this helps and sets everybody kind of on the right path.